Hello, and welcome to the session. Today we'll be talking about the reporting that is available in the eCollect products supporting both Enrollment Express and eCollect forms. So I'm going to start by logging into PowerSchool where eCollect is installed. And for this session, we're going to be working under the Report section from our Start menu with Form Reports. So I'm going to click on that and open up my Form Reporting dashboard. So what I see here are a list of forms that are available to my administrative user. So the reporting, just like on the responder mode, we can lock out certain administrative groups from seeing or responding to a form. That security is enforced here on the reporting dashboard as well. So there's no potential of users using the response report to go around your form level security. So these are all the forms that are available to my administrative user, also shared with the school where I happen to be logged in. So the report is sortable, right? I can sort by title and get it going alpha. I can search, right? So I can search for any given form. I can also redact by categories, so the different categories of forms that I have published out now. Also, I can look for forms that either do not require approval or specifically require approval, and particularly that do, so that I can laser in and see if anything is pending for me to work on, right? An easy way to jump to those forms. To access the response report for any given form, I simply click on the name of the form, and I'm brought to the default response report. So this report is by default conditioned to show me responses to the form in reverse chronological order. So the most recent response up here on top. So you can see that there's a lot of information that we collect for free or automatically behind each form. The responder is the person who hit the submit button, right? So here, Jillian Howard hit the submit button. The person is who they had the form open for. Who was the subject of the form? In this case for Jillian, it was Eric Howard. So this is a good example of a mother submitting on one of their children. The student number or teacher number of that subject. The type of submission, so you can see here this guardian submission came from the parent portal. So this is a parent submission. The one below it came from the administrative portal. So that was an administrative user navigating to this student, Brett Halverson, in submitting the form. The approval status will show approved, pending, or rejected for forms that are that have approval enabled. It will show NA either for forms who do not have that enabled, or in the case of this form, administrative submissions are not subject to approval, so the approval does not apply. And lastly, we get a timestamp where we have the date and the time that the submission was brought in. And this timestamp comes from the PowerSchool server. So if things are date limited, if people need to fill out a form by a certain time, we collect when down to the minute automatically every time someone hits the submit button. There are some different filters that I can put on this report to get different information. So when we logged into the report, if you are carefully observing, you'll know that there are 9 responses to this form, but I'm only looking at 2 here. The data source is one of the neatest filters that we have. If I change, I'm on by person right now. If I change to by response and the report reloads, you can see here are all 9 of my responses, right? Jillian Howard has filled out this form 8 times, and Z31 Aaron here has filled it out once. So this shows that Jillian has updated Eric's address a lot. And you can see we're still going reverse chronologically from 227 all the way back to 17, each at a slightly different time. By response shows you each individual response in granular fashion, just like this. And you can see some of these were approved along the way, and some of them were rejected. By person gives you the roll-up of this view, saying for each person, right? So for Eric, show me the latest response only. Most of our forms work in a collaborative way where each response builds on the last, and the latest response is the most accurate, most true, and generally what you want to be working from. And the by person view keeps you from having to sift and sort through older responses that may no longer matter, but know that they are always there in the background in the by response. Okay. Another filter I can do, I've actually got to run back out to my start page and get a selection of students. So I am going to select all the students in the school whose last name that starts with H, and I'm going to go back to my report. And, right. So here, what's really nice is I can look, these are people who have responded to the form. So if I change from my current responses, I can use my student selection from the start screen to do two things. Is one, show me students within my current selection who have responded. Now both of these students have the last name H, so they remain on the report. And this is the default view, so that's all well and good, but a really powerful trick that the response report can do you is the inverse of this and show me who in my current selection has not filled out this form. And when I do this, the display is going to look a little bit weird, but here are all of those students whose last name starts with H where there is no response to the form. So this is a question that system administrators, school secretaries, people monitoring these reports have to answer a lot is, who hasn't filled this out? Well, here's an easy way. We select those students from the start screen, and I run my non-responders report, and here they are. And of course, there is no responder, there is no time, there is no type, because there is no response. What's really nice is I can select all or some of these students, and by using my action menu, the up arrow pointed here, I can say now make these students my current selection, right? And if I were to go back to my start page, my count has reduced from 54 to 52. These are the students who haven't filled something out. Now in a real PowerSchool SIS, I might be able to use something like an automated email or notification system and contact these families directly to say, hey, everybody needs to fill out this form. Our records indicate you haven't done that yet. Please comply. What's nice about that is you can easily filter out those who have filled out the form so that you're not blasting them with unnecessary information. You can really target in. Okay, so if I just run back in, right, I can of course filter my responses to be in a date range if I only want to look at responses from this month, this week, things like that. So this report is an easy at a glance to know who has, who hasn't, who filled out the form and when. But it doesn't give me much data about what they said on the form. And to get that, I use my Add Column button. So when I add column, I can add data from two different areas. The first is form elements. These are the elements on the form. Right? These are the questions that the parent answered directly. So if I just grab a few of these and hit apply, I can see that on this form, actually both of these parents say that their new state is California and their new city is Cupertino. They must be going to work for Apple. Right? So I can get form elements. This provides an easy at a glance for what did one or multiple responders enter on the form. Right? Gives me an easy at a glance look. If I were to change by response, I can also see this hasn't changed over time, but I would be able to see over time if that response were any different and to just get a good audit history. Using my Add Column button, I can also use my pull down and I can add any student PowerSchool field that I have in my database to this report, even though this form doesn't have a question about this data element. So if maybe this is a field trip permission form and I filter to my students who say yes, and I want to add their discipline alerts and their medical alerts, right, things that we're going to bring out. Of course, my fake students don't have anything entered. But I could also add things like the date of birth or emergency contacts, right? There's emergency contact 1, their grade level, for example. There's gender and grade level. So I can add these things out to the form and you can see nothing in the medical alert. So I'll just use my columns here to pull the alerts off since we don't have any data there. But now I can see these two are coming from the form, but the 4 or 5 columns to the right here, all of these are pulling directly from PowerSchool. So I don't need to continually ask for data points that I already know and have already logged within SIS. I can build a blended report by using those two data elements together, right? So here's my emergency contact, here's their phone. So if I was building that black box or that emergency contact that a chaperone brings on a field trip, I don't have to ask everyone every time, who are your emergency contacts? Do you have a medical alert for this student? All of those sorts of things. I can simply gather permission and ask if you need lunch and all of that good stuff, and I can blend this data in later at any time. And in that way, I'm leveraging a single source of truth for that data instead of on this form, this parent gives this emergency contact, but on another, they give another, and that data starts to seep sideways. So I can continually leverage my data. So another feature of the report that I used a second ago that I'll touch on is the grid. So I can use the grid to add and remove any columns that I've pulled in, like if we don't care about the approval status or if we don't care about the type, right? I can push and pull columns on and off the report just to make as much use of this display range that I want to. So anything that I've already added to the report, I can add or remove at the click of a button. In my action menu, I can also do some other things. So we talked about making the selection, right? Whether it's all the students or just some that I've selected. I can also export this data. So eCollect is really adept at collecting a wide breadth of information. And with the response report, I can blend SIS data onto this report. There are times where this is great, but I might need to calculate based on this data, sort, filter, thinking pivot tables, pivot charts, things like that. PowerSchool is not a good vehicle in general for doing that. So what I can do is I can export this report in two primary ways that I'm going to use. PDF will give me a PDF of the grid here. It has its limitations. Once it starts to get too wide, it's very small on the form. But CSV is my favorite. So CSV is comma-separated values. This file will open in any rows and columns spreadsheet that you're familiar with, Excel, numbers, Google Sheets, Smartsheet, all of those things will read CSV. And from there, I could do calculations, I could do mail merges, I could import things into different systems. Lots of good data transfer and calculation there. So data easily aggregated, collated, and exported if needed. Lastly, I can take this report, and I have this Save Report button in the middle, and if I were to click on that, I can see that my report was saved. What this lets me do is now, every time my user comes into this report, this is how the report is going to load. It's going to pre-populate these columns. Each user can do this. They can save the state of their report. So the states can't be saved user to user, and each user only has one, but it can be a nice time saver if someone is monitoring a form that has a lot of elements, but they're pulling out a subset every time to save them from adding the columns time after time after time. And those are the basics of my response report.